First, I'd like you to imagine that you just completed a long day at work and you're ready to have a nice night's rest to prepare you for tomorrow. Next, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Imagine you're fully relaxed, headed into slumber, when suddenly, that would be our federal government, accompanied by a police officer ready to scavenge through your belongings to see what they may be able to find. That's called a midnight raid. It was implemented during the policy of the man in the house. I'm Kayla Mason, and today I'm going to be discussing what the man in the house policy was, the consequences of it, and how there were long-lasting effects of said policy. The man in the house policy was used on predominantly low-income Black households to determine whether or not they qualified for welfare. According to the Legal Clarity team in 2026, enforcement was invasive. Caseworkers conducted surprise home visits, sometimes in the middle of the night, looking for men's clothing, shaving kits, and other signs of a male presence. If a man lived there, visited frequently, or cohabited with the mother elsewhere, that family would no longer be deemed eligible. And it didn't matter if that man had any biological claim to the children or supported the family, he would be considered a substitute parent. This policy was used to prevent fraud, however, it does seem a bit unjustifiable. Midnight raids were frightening enough, but preparing for the next steps caused more than just fear. That mother would have to decide whether or not she could feed her children or wanted to pursue a relationship. Because, as stated in the West Encyclopedia of American Law in 2026, under the man in the house rule, a child who otherwise qualified for welfare benefits was denied those benefits if the child's mother was living with or having relationships with any single or married able-bodied man. And sometimes there was no relationship at all. It was simply a family member or a friend, and that mother would have to decide if she could afford legal advice to fight the repercussions from our government. This instilled a culture of fear around asking for help. This was also during a time where well-paying jobs and housing were not attainable amongst the Black community. Terry Gross in 2017 mentioned The Law of Color, which is a book by Rothstein. He notes that the Federal Housing Administration, which was established in 1934, furthered segregation efforts by refusing to insure mortgages in and near African American neighborhoods. This only lasted from the 1930s to 1968 once it was overruled, but the effects were long-lasting. This policy aided in the single mother trope. We've all heard the joke, your dad went to the store to get milk and never returned, but to some people, this was not a joke. As of 2021, the percentage for two-parent households amongst the Black community was 39%, as stated by the N.E. Casey Foundation, last updated in 2023. Whereas in the 60s, that number was 67%, held by a survey, as we see in a survey held by Donald J. Hernandez. We no longer have this man in the house policy. What we now have is income-based aid. When applying to welfare looks at all adults in the household in the combined income, regardless of whether or not income or costs are split and separated, all adults do contribute. Parents have to decide whether they need to work multiple jobs to afford to live and risk never seeing their children, or fibbing to try to finagle the system to receive that aid. In some states, when you apply to SNAP, which is food stamps, and TANF, which is temporary assistance for needy families, a child support case is automatically open, regardless of whatever financial standing you have with that father. If you are unmarried, that case will be opened. This rule no longer exists, but we see how that's affected many. We now know what a midnight raid is and how it was implemented for the man in the house policy. We know the consequences of it, and we also see how that's affected people way after its time. Regardless of whatever stance you have for people receiving aid, do you think it's fair that a child goes without, depending on a house guest the government does not approve of? Thank you.